So, as most of us, I think, are aware, it is rather almost cliche that Jews make good lawyers, right?
It is a cliche.
It is a cliche. It is actually a little bit of a stereotype, and not often.
Hopefully they're good lawyers.
Well, hopefully they're good, but it's not often meant flattering.
No, it isn't.
Because
Because it's considered
conniving, hair splitting, scheming, maybe even a little bit of grasping in there, and that somehow Jews are able to manipulate the law to say whatever it is they want, to twist things to their own advantage. And indeed, I'd like to give you an example of exactly that I can prove, thanks to good, honest Jewish thinking, that I own what's in your wallet or purses, that it's my property. Hello. Hi, come on in. Grab one of the red books there, the Eitzstein Chumash. Great. And then grab a chair wherever you like. So I was just about ready to prove that I own what's in your wallets. All right, so that's good that we have more people here now, because that's better for me. So let me just explain. So this is my wallet, right? And who owns this? Who owns this?
You do.
Exactly. Do you have permission to take what's in my wallet? No, of course not. I have permission to take what's in my wallet. You do not. For your own wallets or purses, do you have permission to take what's from your wallet or purse? Absolutely. Well, therefore, I must have permission as well. Because in a case where I have permission and you do not, surely it must be in a case where you have permission that I must also. Following that logic?
No. Yes.
Oh, if I get to make a decision in a case where you do not have the power to make that decision.
Oh, you're making the decision. You're making the rule.
No. I'm talking about authority. If I have the authority to take what's in my wallet and you lack that authority, then surely in another case where you do have authority, because of my clearly superior authority, I must also have authority in that case too. No?
My authority doesn't hold.
It's technically a Kal V'chomer argument. It's what we call an a for Torah in the fancy Latin. It means all the more so. Which is also known as being a jerk. Yes, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine.
Sounds like the government.
Sounds like a what?
The government.
Sounds like the government. It's not going to work, I'm afraid. Yeah, we're not going to be able to stream until we get the internet sorted out completely. But creative legal thinking is an important part of Jewish law and of Jewish spirituality. Now, that was a joke, obviously, and the stereotypes against Jewish lawyers are much less funny. But the kernel of truth behind the joke, as well as the stereotypes, is that Jews do believe that the law matters and that the words of the law matter. And that if we take things seriously, if we take the Torah as being God's instruction book for life, that we should read those instructions carefully, and that we should be willing to argue about the meaning of those instructions. Does that make sense? All right, let's take a look at some instructions then. So we are in the book of Numbers. We're in Parashat Naso, and we're going to be looking at chapter 5 today. Chapter 5 in the Eitzstein Chumash is on page 793. Otherwise, just flip to your book of Numbers, chapter 5. How are we doing? All set? Okay, so we're at the bottom of the page in the Eitzstein. Who would like to kick us off? Harry?
The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Instruct the Israelites to remove from camp anyone with an eruption or discharge, and anyone defiled by a corpse. Remove male and female alike, put them outside the camp so they do not defile the camp of those in whose midst I dwell."
Okay. Actually, go ahead and read the implication of the implementation of this.
The Israelites did so, putting them outside the camp, as the Lord had spoken to Moses, so the Israelites did.
Okay, so is this an example of Jewish cruelty to the ill? And indeed, if you go on certain websites, this line will be quoted as an example of how God hates the sick. Is that what it says?
No, I think it's more to prevent some sort of spread of disease.
Is it?
No?
Read the words carefully. What are the categories that are being dealt with here?
Eruption.
Eruptions,
discharge,
discharges, which is a fancy way of saying leakages of our body.
anyone defiled by a corpse.
And anyone defiled by a corpse. Well, wait a minute.
What is-
One of those things is not like the other.
That's right.
I mean, how is it contagious to be near someone who was near a body?
They don't know what
Depends
the
on the
person
state
died
of the
of.
corpse too. I mean, you know, if you're gonna read into this, as you say,
Mhm.
legal implications, medical implications. If the corpse has discharges and you touch it.
Oh, it doesn't say the corpse has
No, it
discharges.
doesn't, but it does say defiled by a corpse. It could mean that.
But what does defiled by a corpse mean in Jewish law, which is explained elsewhere? Tameh, that you are ritually impure. Not defiled in the sense that there are giant pustules of the corpse exploding across you, but anyone who comes into contact with a corpse, or indeed according to Jewish law, anyone who happens to be in the same structure when the person dies, becomes ritually impure. Does that make them a bad person? No. Does it mean there are certain limitations on the rituals they can perform until they've gone through a purification process? Yes. Therefore, understanding that someone who becomes ritually impure by contact with a corpse is not making a negative statement about that person, we can apply from that case to the other two cases that are listed in the same verse, which is someone who has a bodily discharge of some unfortunate variety, and somebody who is suffering from tzara'at. That's what it means by the eruptions here. It's the condition often defined as leprosy, but it isn't. Are they then people who are being punished for their condition? No. Their isolation is simply to avoid any unnecessary ritual contamination, ritual impurity. Doesn't make any statements about the quality of the person. It simply means that for these conditions, which were considered spiritual conditions, there is the risk of spreading the ritual impurity, and therefore we're going to make sure you stay here until these things clear up. And while you're there, you're not being abandoned, as unfortunately one website that I read described it. You will be helped and taken care of, and in fact, we know from the earlier sections of Vayikra, the book of Leviticus, that people with inopportune discharges or eruptions, the tzara'at, are being weekly examined by the Kohanim. The people who should be most concerned with ritual impurity are devoting themselves to helping these people. But you don't notice that unless you read it carefully. Right?
Are all three of these eruptions, discharges, and defilement, are they all spiritual? Or do they really mean to discharge?
Any ritual impurity is a spiritual condition. Does the eruption, do the discharges have physical manifestations? Yes, absolutely. I mean, no one denies. I mean, Vayikra describes it in quite detail, that you get these blotches and such that create the condition known as tzara'at, usually translated as leprosy. And no one denies that Vayikra says that the discharges are bodily fluids that are leaving your body at the inappropriate times. So the physicality of the symptoms is definitely agreed upon, but the cause and implication is entirely spiritual. Make sense? Edie, you look like you're...
No, you just said that the Kohanim take care of them, they inspect them,
Mhm.
they take care of them. Doesn't that render them ritually impure?
For a temporary time, yes. And then they go through the rituals to purify themselves again, and it's fine. So ritual impurity is not permanent. And to try and act like this is A, against people who are diseased, when it's not, and B, to somehow say that they're being abandoned and ostracized for whatever their condition is patently false, if you read both this verse as well as the rest of the Torah in its entirety. All right, let's take another case and see if we can read closely. So we'll carry on with verse 5 now.
Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the Israelites. When a man or woman commits any wrong toward a fellow man, thus breaking faith with the Lord, and that person realizes his guilt, he shall confess the wrong that he has done. He shall make restitution in the principal amount and add 1/5 to it, giving it to him whom he has wronged. If the man has no kinsman to whom restitution can be made, the amount repaid shall go to the Lord for the priest, in addition to the ram of expiation with which expiation is made on his behalf. So too, any gift among the sacred donations that the Israelites offer shall be the priest's, and each shall retain his sacred donations. Each priest shall keep what is given to him.
Okay.
Oh, no wonder they got mad at the priests later.
Why would they get mad at the priests?
Because they were keeping all the money that was given them and not distributing it out.
But this money that's given to them is their due.
Right.
I mean, it's not saying that not every act of tzedakah, for example, would go through the priests and then be expected to go out. We would give tzedakah directly to those in need. This is if you happen to bring an offering and you want to give a little something extra, that belongs to the priest that actually does the officiation, as opposed to him having to pass it on to someone higher up. So whoever does the job, whoever's got the knife in the hand, whoever's doing the sacrifice, he gets to keep whatever additional bonus you've given. So if you're the priest on call and the big macher shows up with the big bonus gift that he wants to give, you don't have to hand it over to your boss. You get to keep it. You don't have to split it with the other priests. It's your good fortune for having been on call that day. It doesn't mean that every gift that people would give to the temple was for them. Someone could give a gift straight to the temple to help with the repairs or to help with other things. But if someone wanted to give an honorarium, it belonged to the priest who did the officiating. Does that make it a little bit more palatable?
A little.
Little.
A little.
Okay. Anything else strike you as interesting about this case? Well, let me ask you a little hypothetical. It's one that we're going to look at an answer to, but I want to hear your own creative options first. Let's say the person who commits the wrongdoing is a priest. After all, we know that priests do commit transgressions. So they commit a transgression against another person, and that person dies before they can make restitution. What happens to the money that they were going to give as restitution? Do I get to keep it? Because after all, if someone doesn't have any relatives to take it, it should go to the priest. Well, I'm a priest, so do I get to keep that which I stole because I was lucky enough to steal from a person with no relatives who could claim it after their death?
It doesn't seem right.
That doesn't seem right, but isn't that what the law seems to be saying?
No,
No?
no. Why should the priest profit from his misdoings?
Well, it's just the way the law is written. It's a loophole.
What? No, it's not.
But it says very clearly that you have to give back the money and plus a fifth to anybody that you've wronged. However, in the case where they're dead, the restitution should go to the priest. Well, I'm a priest. He's dead. He's got no relatives. Why can't I take the restitution on behalf of God? Isn't that just a nice little loophole that if I happen to rob someone who has no relatives, that I just get lucky and I don't have a sin to burden me down either?
This does not
It's like getting the lottery.
Excuse me. This does not specify which priest the money is to go to.
Exactly. So why not me?
I'll bet there's a
It's
little
not-
asterisk.
It's not this debate then.
Exception.
You think that maybe God tried to take care of that somewhere?
Somewhere.
Well, let's see how our ancestors took it. So let me just grab a copy for myself and pass them down our two tables.
Oh, yes.
There we go. We're on the second paragraph. The first paragraph is the proof text of how you can claim that what's in someone else's wallet belongs to you, just in case you want to impress your friends and family.
Do we have any more?
Oh yes, there's some more coming around.
Yes.
I didn't split them evenly when I passed them out, sorry. Everyone okay? Okay, so we're on the second text here where it says, if the robber was a priest. Notice if, by the way. Not all robbers are priests. Not all priests are robbers, despite what you may have heard in the news. Okay, so, got a few more people popping in. Hi. Of course, of course. I think if you want to pull up a couple chairs around this end, we've got plenty of room. Oh, grab a chumash as you come in. Did we run out? No, we got a couple down there. Good. Okay, so we were just talking about priests as robbers. We're in chapter 5 of the book of Numbers, the book of Bamidbar, and the issue comes up where if someone steals from another person, in particular is what we're dealing with, and they need to pay it back. And they pay it back with a 20% penalty on top of it. So if I steal $100 from someone, I have to pay them back 120, right? And the question arose, well, what happens if the person you're paying back dies? Who do you give the money to? And they say, well, if there are no relatives, then you have to give it to the priest. So the question came up with good Jewish loopholism. What happens if the robber is a priest? If he steals the money from someone, and then they die leaving no heirs to take the money on their behalf, and we're supposed to give it to the priest, can he then just give it back to himself and everything's fine? No sin, but he gets to keep the money. Because he's given back the money, so therefore the sin is cleansed, but he gets to keep the money. Therefore he gets to go party. So that was the question. Everyone seemed very, very uncomfortable with that little loophole shenanigans. So now we're going to see what the rabbi said to try and prevent that. So we're on the second paragraph on the first page, where it says, if the robber was a priest. Who'd like to read us through this? A little bit of Talmud. Edie.
If the robber was a priest, how do we know that he may not say, since the stolen goods revert to the priesthood, and lo, it is in my possession already, so I'll keep it. And that is, after all, a matter of sheer logic. If when it belongs to others, this one has a claim on it. If it is in his own domain, it is not a matter of...
Is that not a matter?
Not a matter.
Of a fortiori, which is all the more so.
Okay.
Is the shorthand way of saying, if it's like this in case Y, which is a minor or small case, then, or a different case, then certainly in a easier case, it should also be the case. It's applying the logic of one situation to another because you assume that this case is more obvious than the case that you already know about. So let's unpack what he's saying here, this priest talking to himself. If a robber was a priest, right, I've already got it in my hands. Now, generally speaking, if someone were to rob another person and then have to pay it back, and that person was dead and they left no heirs, and I had to give it to the priests, then it would become my property when they gave it to me, right? In the usual case, when someone else is the robber and I'm the priest collecting on behalf of the deceased, then I would own it when it came to me, right? Make sense? So, what's that?
No, it's stipulated.
It's there. So, if when it was someone else's money, it already becomes mine when they need to give it back. In this case, where it already is in my possession, when it goes to the priests, shouldn't I obviously be the one who gets it? I've already got first dibs. We buying this logic? No, it isn't right. It isn't right. And indeed, what the sages go on to say, and it's quite a lengthy argument where they try to defend this, is that it doesn't belong to the priest because in the intermediate step between paying back for your crime and going to the priest, ownership is transferred. Who gets to own it in the middle? God. As our verse said, if you read it very carefully, right? If the man has no kinsman to whom restitution can be made, the amount repaid shall go to the Lord for the priest. And God isn't going to give it to that priest. So because the money actually transfers property twice in its path to restitution, therefore this priest can be cut out of that loop. Make sense? All from careful reading. But there's another problem that our sages noticed with this particular phrase. Who has no one to make the claim? Who has no relatives? Anybody born from a petri dish? I mean, who would have no relatives? How can the Torah say, or I should put it the other way, the practical implication, how would it ever be that the money would end up going to the priests? I mean, let's say I die leaving no relatives, no heirs, right? Well, it can go to my father or my mother, right? They would be my heirs. Well, let's assume they already passed away. What would happen?
Brother or cousin.
It would go to my brother or go to my sister. Let's say they're passed away, leaving children. Then it would go to my nieces or nephews. Let's say they don't have any. It might go to my uncle. Let's say I don't have any uncles because my parents were both only children. Well, then it would go out to second cousins. Well, eventually, I came from somewhere. And eventually someone else is alive that would be able to redeem what was coming as compensation for someone else's crime. So is the Torah wrong when it says that restitution would be made to the priests if there were no living relatives? Did the Torah forget about this whole genetic thing, that we actually all have relatives alive somewhere? Assuming we're not the last person alive on the face of the planet. Someone out there is connected to me. What's that? It's a matter of finding them, yes, but it doesn't say if it's too difficult to find a relative. It says if there are no relatives.
Well, the way it reads, to whom restitution can be made, could it mean that there are only certain kinsmen that are allowed to receive the restitution?
So one answer would be to limit the restitutional claims.
Heirs.
Exactly, the people that would be within the pool to claim restitution. And indeed, that might be the most obvious solution to this issue, which is not the solution that the rabbis picked. Because the rabbis are good lateral thinkers. They like to find a little bit more of a creative interpretation of these problems rather than just going for the straightforward. Because in the process, we can often learn a great deal more. Okay, Judy, we're going to add anything, or yes, no?
I was going to answer your question, partly because I read ahead.
Oh, well, if you read ahead.
But I had a slightly different version.
Okay, well, tell you what, why don't you read us the solution on the page, and then give us your version as well. The third paragraph, if the man has no redeemer.
If the man has no redeemer to whom restitution can be made, but is there anyone in Israel who lacks redeemers? Rather, Scripture is speaking of theft from converts.
Okay, so what's our solution? Just say it for me.
So we're talking about
It's a convert. If you steal from a convert, and then he dies, there's no one who is an heir, and therefore the money would go to the priests.
Why not charity?
Why not charity? Well, the priest might certainly elect to use it for that purpose, but it has to go through the priestly institution. Otherwise, who would be deciding which charity it went to?
Oh, they didn't have so many in those days.
Oh, they had plenty of people in need. They didn't have lots of organizations set up to administer it.
So what was Judy's other view?
What was your theory?
The ger, the stranger residing among us.
Maybe not necessarily someone who was a convert, but just someone who happened to be living in the land.
Yeah.
That when they died, there was no one we could find because they came from Alaska.
Yeah.
And there's no connection to the Jewish people, no connection to the family tree, no one we can find. Indeed, that could have also been a case. But the rabbis specifically chose to label this as being aimed at the Ger Tzaddik, the righteous convert, who, when they convert, are considered legally to no longer be connected to their biological family with regards to inheritance laws. Make sense? The phrase being born again is actually much more of a Jewish concept than other faiths. When you are converted, you are considered to be born a second time. And your parents are no longer your legal parents under Jewish law. Now that was very important in the ancient world, much more so than in the modern circumstances, of course, because if that were not the case, let's say somebody converts to Judaism and they buy a nice house in Jerusalem, and it's a lovely place right next to the temple, and then they pass away, leaving no heirs. And their brother comes and says, well, I'm his heir, and I'd like to turn this into a nice altar for Baal, because now I own this piece of Jerusalem, or a large piece of a tribe, perhaps. And then when it comes time to revert ownership back to the original owners and the tribal owners, he's not bound by that law, right? So you would essentially be, if you did not sever the connection legally between a convert and their family, then you would end up potentially with portions of Israel moving outside of the tribal allotments, moving outside of the ownership, the overall ownership of Israel. And that was considered to be rather problematic. So it wasn't necessarily anything to discriminate against their family or to say they need to sever all contact with their family. It was a question of simple legal workings. Make sense?
I hate to chase a rabbit, but this is personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
What about our own heirs, our children, who are also Jewish?
Right.
And does this still apply to me as a convert?
Oh, you mean...
That would not eliminate my children's rights.
You mean if you were a convert and you have children,
Yes.
your children would absolutely be your heirs. Yes,
Okay.
that's not an issue at all.
Okay.
The only place where it becomes a little bit of an issue is if someone converts after they've had children and their children do not follow them into Judaism. So an adult convert, for example, with adult children, technically their children are, of course, not Jewish because the mother wasn't Jewish at the time of giving birth. Then, according to Jewish law, yes, they would not be allowed to inherit through the Jewish system. Now, there's nothing wrong with inheriting through the civil system. And indeed, in almost all cases in the modern world, we deal with inheritance law through the civil system in Judaism. Even where it's a case of Jew giving to Jewish children, it's still all held by civil law under modern Jewish life. But yes, technically under Jewish law, that would be the only case where children would be outside the inheritance line. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's so many arguments nowadays about the land in Israel,
Mhm.
and whether it once some of it belonged to, that there's some Arab ownership.
Mm-hmm.
Is this a philosophy that is carried through to this day, where they're using that as a reason for saying they don't really own this land, even if they have an ownership seal?
Depends who's talking. So as far as the secular government of Israel goes, no, this is not used as a legal argument.
They recognize.
Yes and no. Yes, so if someone, for example, is living inside the land of Israel, they're a resident of Haifa, a resident of Nazareth, two large non-Jewish cities with large non-Jewish populations, if they have a title to a house, then it's their house, and no one questions that. In the areas that are not under Israeli legal control, then things get a little bit more slippery in terms of who proves what in terms of ownership rights. So you'll often hear about issues of, especially in the Eastern Jerusalem neighborhoods, about ownership rights. But those are handled under secular law. Now the rhetoric can often be used, these ideas can often be used in the rhetoric by, shall we say, interested parties that will try to point out the idea that no one ever has the right to own any land in Israel except for Jews. But secular law in Israel absolutely allows for non-Jews to own land. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. let's go ahead and see how we can get this even more complicated. Judy, why don't you carry on?
If one stole money from a proselyte and took a false oath to him, and heard that the proselyte had died, so he took the money due and the trespass offering to Jerusalem. But there he met the proselyte, who converted the sum into a loan. If the proselyte then were to die, then the robber would acquire title to the funds that he still held.
Got all that? It's complicated. Isn't life fun? When we actually try to apply God's law, it's not easy. Oh, I'm sorry, what was that, Edie? Or in law class? You don't want to repeat that for the sake of posterity? Okay. So, if I steal money from a convert, and then I swear I don't have it, and I hear the guy dies, and I think, okay, well, I'm going to go take it back now, because I feel guilty, the guy died. So I take it to Jerusalem, because I have to add this extra 20%, and I'm going to give it to the priest there. But hey, he's still alive. The reports of his death have been greatly exaggerated. So I give him back the money, and he in turn turns it into a loan, which for whatever reason he gives to me. Crazy guy. And then he dies. Do I get to keep the money? What?
You have to pay back the loan.
Well,
If it's not.
but
a
he's
gift,
but
it's
he's
a loan.
dead.
So you have to find his kin or give it to the priest.
Well, but do I? Because now it's a loan money. It's not paying back for my sin money. Because I already paid that back to him. It just ended up coming back to me immediately. What's that? It got laundered. Oh, wait, sorry. Okay, well, let's see how they handle it. Wrap us up from this section of Baba Kama.
Okay. Said Rabbah, with what case do we deal here? It is one in which he stole from a proselyte and falsely took an oath to him, and then the proselyte died, and after he died, he confessed what he had done. Now at the moment at which he made the confession, God acquired title to what had been stolen and assigned it to the priests.
Okay, so we use the same answer that we used for our priest loophole, which is, no, and there was an extra step in here that didn't get spelled out, which is the money was diverted to God. So no, you don't get to keep your ill-gotten gains, no matter how clever you may think you are. So, perhaps one of the reasons why Jews have been such good lawyers is because we've been dealing with people trying to get through loopholes forever, that we can spot a loophole a mile away. And if you happen to leave the loophole open, well, then it's up to my conscience of whether I'm going to exploit it. Okay, but think for a moment about the idea that the rabbis have said that this whole line of Torah about making restitution to the priests in the case of the death of the person who was actually wronged has been limited entirely to the case of converts. They've taken what at the surface seemed like a very reasonable proposition. I need to make restitution. The guy's dead. I give it to his family. His family ain't around. I give it to the priests. And said, this is all a drama that is being played out with one type, one category in mind. Converts. Now, why would they have done that? I mean, why would they emphasize converts in this particular case of depriving someone and then trying to make restitution as having to specifically go through this priestly, jumping through these priestly hoops? Why not just say, hey, the guy's dead, he was a convert, nobody left for him, just get to keep it? What would the implication be if that had been the ruling?
That it was okay to be less moral with converts.
Exactly. You would think, okay, hey, if I'm going to pick two guys, if I'm going to pick between two guys of who I want to rob, I'll pick the convert. Because that way, when he dies, which, I may or may not help with, I don't have to pay it back. But to say specifically that God is their heir, and therefore to fail to pay it back is not just a crime against them or their family, but is a crime deliberately against God in a unique way, you are elevating their protection. Converts were considered among the most vulnerable members of the society because they didn't have families to defend them. You didn't have, my big brother to go and beat you up and take back my lunch money, because I was all alone. And so converts get special protection. Does that make sense? And in fact, about this verse in Midrash Rabbah, in Bamidbar Rabbah, we get a rather long discussion about God's relationship and attitude towards those who converted, and by extension, of course, what our faith's attitude is as well. So we're going to pick up the very bottom of the front page, where it says, "The Lord loves the righteous." Who'd like to start us off here? We just got to sing this whole section of Psalms when we were singing Hallel during Shavuot. Now you'll have something else to think about the next time we sing it for Rosh Chodesh. Thanks.
The Lord loves the righteous. The Holy One, blessed be he, said, I love those who love me. And he said, for I shall honor those who honor me. They love me and I love them. Why is the Holy One blessed be he, love the righteous?
Now notice at the moment we're just talking about the righteous in general. Anybody that is a tzaddik, anyone that is a righteous person. Why does God love them? Why give them so much love? I mean, doesn't God love all his children, righteous or not? Doesn't God love all his children, whether they're super righteous or whether they're just, not a bad person? Why give this special affection? And they give an answer. Carry on.
They have neither clan nor family. We find that the priests are a clan and the Levites are a clan, as it is written in the house of Aaron. Bless the Lord, the house of the Levites. Bless the Lord. If one should desire...
So that's taken from Psalm 118, where it says, Beit Aharon, the house of Aaron, bless Adonai. And the house of Levites, bless Adonai. But
if one should desire to become a priest, he cannot. To become a Levite, he cannot. Why? Because his father was not a priest or a Levite.
so if I say, I want to bless God too, just like the Kohanim, tough. If your dad's not a Kohen, you will never be a Kohen. It's legally impossible. If your dad was not a Levite, you will never be a Levite. Just can't be done. There's no ceremony, no ritual, no donation, no mikvah, no waving of magic wands that can change you from being an Israelite to being either a Levite or a Kohanim. You are what you are, and vice versa. You can't stop being one of the others as well, although you can lose some of your privileges. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand,
But should one desire to become a tzaddik, a righteous person, this even a Gentile can become, for he belongs to no clan.
so the fact that we don't have a clan, that is to say the rest of us who are not Kohanim, Levi'im, or indeed even somebody who isn't Jewish, gives us more mobility. And as we're going to see, even gives us more merit.
And therefore the psalmist said, those who fear the Lord, bless the Lord. He does not say the house of those who fear the Lord. For those who fear the Lord are not part of the clan. Of their own volition they volunteered and loved the Holy One. Blessed be he, therefore the Holy One. Blessed be he, loves them. And therefore it says, the Lord loves the righteous.
All right. When someone is born, they are not destined to love God, to serve God, to fear God in the sense of awe and respect. That's their choice. Jew or non-Jew. That's why it doesn't say, Beit Yirei Adonai, the house of those who fear God. Because you're not born into that. That's your own option. That's your own selection of choosing how you're going to direct yourself towards God. And as such, says the Midrash, God will reciprocate in the same way. Does that make sense? Maybe? Okay, so the next time you hear the phrase Jew by choice, recognize that anyone who is devoted to God, according to this Midrash, is a type of Jew by choice. It's not exactly the same thing as a convert, which is a much more technical phrase, but all of us who choose to dedicate our lives to God are choosing to do so.
So the rest of us are Israelites or converts?
Correct.
Not converts.
Correct. The world is essentially, in this case, they're dividing it up into groups. They're saying there's the house of the Kohanim, the house of the Levites, the rest of the Jewish people, and those who convert to join them, and the rest of the world. But those who convert and those who choose, even having been born just one of the regular guys, to dedicate themselves to God, wow, what a choice.
Okay.
It's not just your family duty. It's not just your family obligation. It's something that you are choosing to do. Make sense? All right. Carry on as we're going to use a little bit of a parable here to try and drive the idea home.
The Lord greatly loves the converts. To what may this be compared? To a king who possessed sheep that daily went out to the field and returned at evening. Once a deer entered with the sheep. They went out to pasture with them. When the sheep entered their pens, it entered with them. When they went out to graze, it accompanied them.
All right, let's make sure we got the pattern here, right? We got a king, got a big flock, and one day this deer wanders into the flock, and he starts eating with the sheep. And when the sheep go back home at night, the deer goes with them. And when the sheep go out in the morning, the deer is going with them now.
The king was
Informed. Don't make him sick.
This deer accompanies the sheep and grazes with them. Every day it goes out with them and returns with them. The king met the deer, and when it went out to the field, he appointed a qualified shepherd who made certain that no one harmed the deer. All were careful with it. When it entered with the sheep, the king told them, "Give it water." He loved it.
Okay, we have to make sure we understand each stage. So the king's informed, hey, there's this deer hanging out with your sheep. What do you want us to do with it? And rather than saying, venison is nice, he says, I want you to make sure you got a special shepherd watching out for that deer. Make sure that nothing harasses it, no wolves get it, no one comes in and does anything to it. And when it comes back, treat it gently, make sure it has water, knows what's going on, and take good extra special care of the deer. Make sense? At which point the people ask,
They said to him, "Our master, how many rams have you? How many lambs have you? And how many goats have you? But you warned us only regarding this deer. Every day you charge us."
what's up? You got like hundreds and hundreds of lambs, rams, goats. You don't give us any special instructions on any of them. Why does this deer get special treatment?
The king said to them, "The sheep have no choice. This is their nature. To graze in the field every day and at eventide, they come to sleep in the pen. But the deer sleep in the wild. It is not in their nature to enter the habitat. Shall we not be thankful to this deer who leaves the great and expansive desert where all the animals live and come to stand in the yard?"
Okay. You like that? Okay. Look at this. Sheep are doing what sheep do. But the deer, wow, that's something weird for a deer to do. And if the deer's doing that, we need to make sure that we treat the deer better than we might otherwise treat the sheep, because the deer is going against its nature by doing this. The deer is giving up the expanse of the wild open wilderness and coming to live in our pen, with our flock. We have to note that and therefore respond differently. Let's go ahead and get the what's called the nimshal, which is the upshot of the parable, and see then how we respond to it in more detail than just, I like that, as Miriam put it.
Shall we not be thankful to this deer who leaves the great and expansive desert where all animals live and comes to stand in the yard? Similarly, should we not be thankful to the convert who leaves his family and his father's house and leaves his nation and all other nations of the world and joins us? Therefore, he augmented his protection, admonishing Israel to be very careful not to harm them, saying, "You shall love the convert and you shall not shoot the convert."
All right. You like it. Why?
I like the feeling, the whole similarity of explaining that the deer is an exception and
Mhm.
he's making the choice, and that we should treat the deer with care and consideration and love,
Mm-hmm.
and to carry that through to that's the way we should treat the convert. it just is suitable and appropriate.
I don't think we have to know
I
who is
feel
a
it.
convert and who isn't.
Okay, well, wait a minute. Hold on a second. As you're pointing out, doesn't this mean then we would have to know who was a convert and who wasn't? And doesn't that mean that we would then have to change our behavior between one category and the other?
We should treat all.
Shouldn't we treat everybody the same? I mean, is this unfair affirmative action for deer? I mean converts. I mean, it's are we treating all Jews equally under this metaphor, this parable, or are we saying the converts are going to be better treated or differently treated, which has its own stigma attached to it, doesn't it?
Once the person is a convert,
Mm-hmm.
aren't we supposed to not discuss the fact?
Absolutely, and in the section earlier in the Talmud, actually it's later in the Talmud, they discuss specifically never reminding a convert of their origins, of their past, of the things they did before they converted, or in any way, shape, or form making them feel uncomfortable about having converted. On the other hand, when someone is a convert, how are they called to the Torah?
Yeah, that's what I was going to mention.
How? Fill it in. Right, they are called up as being bar or bat, son or daughter of Avraham Avinu, Sarah Imenu, that they are the son or daughter of Abraham our father and Sarah our mother, meaning the Abraham and Sarah.
That would be the only time you would know that.
Well, it's a pretty public time to know, though.
I know, so that I wouldn't say, oh, are you a convert?
We wouldn't need to ask now. Now you know.
Not if they're called to the Torah, yes.
Fabienne, you were going to add something
No, that's exactly what I was going to say.
about the calling up? No.
Not on the demand, on the fact that, a convert, you make him feel welcome at the beginning because it's a hard
Mhm.
transition. I mean, it's a choice that he made, but it's still a hard transition for her. But afterwards, it should be just considered like any other.
Right. So
Of the families.
what we're facing here is a challenge of perspective. It's very easy. Let's see if we've got a pen that's working here. It's very easy to imagine that this is saying you should treat everybody at this level. This is your, let's say this is your, from here up, this is your average Jew, right? And this is the treatment that you're giving them. And it should all be at this level. That's how you should treat another person. But a convert should get extra special treatment. You go above and beyond for them. But that would carry with it the implication that you would not just be treating them different or better, which is not in and itself bad. I mean, after all, we treat our loved ones better than we treat a stranger on the street as well. But that we would be doing so in a way that would stigmatize them for having been a convert. We would be doing it in a way that highlights their status as a convert. We'd be doing it in a way that continually reminds them of their status as a convert. And that, I think, we are rightly uncomfortable with. However, what I believe the Midrash is hinting at, and as well as the commandments explicitly within the Torah, is that our natural inclination is not to treat the convert the same as a Jew, as a native-born Jew. That indeed, many people, left to their own devices, that is to say, without divine intervention, would treat the convert less well than they would a native-born Jew. We see this in numerous circumstances where people are skittish, are apprehensive about people who have converted or about people who are converting. They ask about their motives. They suspect their background. They may be uncomfortable with the idea of their children marrying them. These issues have come up time and time again throughout Jewish history. So instead of saying all of these things are there to treat the convert better than you would treat an average Jew, the additional care is enough to bring them up to where they should be. that we need to recognize our own natural predilection is like the shepherds, to say, hey, there's a deer here, what do you want us to do with it? Now, if the shepherds had naturally thought, hey, look, the wild animal came in, why don't we treat it the same way as we treat sheep, they would not have gone to the king. They went to the king because they thought there was something wrong with the deer. It was abnormal, and they didn't know what they were supposed to do. Should they chase it away? Should they kill it? Should they keep it? They weren't sure, but there was something suspect about this animal. And it was only upon the king's instructions that they began to see that they had to treat it really, really well, not for the benefit of the animal, but for the benefit of themselves, that they would not do anything that would drive it away. So they had to be extra careful so that their own attitudes would not become a hindrance to the hind. Hindrance. It's a better visual pun. Sorry. Hind is another word for deer. Okay. Make sense? Possibly?
Would it not be a better solution to put your line back up there above the converts as you had them above the line as well?
Well, sorry.
And also to put that same box above the Jew.
Sorry, let's try and make sure that's even. Put a little bit more. Sorry, I don't have my T-square out to make it perfect. Absolutely. Judaism believes that we should go above and beyond the line of the law and how we treat another person. However, Judaism does recognize that the law is the minimum expectation of how we'll treat another person. So Judaism has had a historic reluctance to formally obligate everyone to go above and beyond the call of duty, because that means you're actually changing the call of duty. So instead, it says, this is what we are required to do. This is what we hope you do. And that's absolutely what we hope, is that people will treat each other with more respect, more kindness, more assistance, more compassion than the law requires. But where the law requires, it's the same for both. And how we treat others should be the same for both. We should be equally inspired to treat a native-born Jew and someone who is converted above the limit, above the minimum of the law. But like I said, Judaism has been very reluctant to ever require going above the law, because that just changes where the line of the law is. Any other questions, comments, reactions?
My only comment is that in today's world, both here in the United States and in Israel, you have an impression that some of the rabbis and people are looking at the different denominations within Judaism as levels. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3, instead of...
Or this is 1, this is 0, this is -1. Yes. You have to mess it up by bringing in the real world.
So it's almost as though we should have a class and say to the, go back and read.
Well,
which I know is foolish, but...
It's not a matter of being foolish, but for the moment our focus should be on ourselves, of how we're treating the people in our community and how we treat people outside our community as well. We will have more impact by example than by pointing to the text. Because unfortunately, as we began on by saying, we are very good at creative interpretations of text. And those who condemn those that are different for them for no reason other than simply that they are different, have found creative explanations of why they think that's valid. And only by showing them the effect of living the life as our sages originally intended, do we have a chance of persuading them otherwise. As the old saying goes, positions that were not reached with the benefit of logic will not be overcome with the benefit of logic.